Welcome back to the Well-Rounded Wealth podcast. We are on episode 16, and today we are going to be talking about failure and, interestingly, why we love it. So, Patrick, how you doing? Real quick, what made you want to do this topic?
Yeah, this is really interesting to me because I've had so many mindset shifts around it. Heard so many people recently talk about, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. And the trigger that keeps occurring in my mind is, okay, why haven't you done that? Or even for myself, why haven't I started that? And
Mm,
I started doing a bunch of reading and just listening to things and reflecting on things that I'm doing in my life. And I started asking myself that question. Why haven't I started the things I wanted to do? Is it I am afraid of failure? And what does failure mean? So that's the premise behind this. And that's what we're going to dive in today. And hopefully we uncover a few tips to help not only you and I, Jack, but also anyone listening. So,
yep, also you guys as well. Yeah, so an interesting thing when I started looking into the topic and knowing that we were going to kind of talk about failure is kind of how much failure equivalates with fear to me. It's more the fear of failure that gets to me more than the failure itself. So, do you have a fear of failure, or do you just not like failure itself? You think?
I think there's two sides to that because I think first we have to define fear and what it means to you. So, fear is that emotion that's caused by something that's perceived as, when you break it down to its simplest form, it's dangerous or threatening or could cause pain. And fear can technically be psychological or physical, right? So you can be
Mm-hmm.
emotionally hurt, or someone could actually chase you and beat you with a hammer or something like that. And
Beat you
you
with
can
a
be,
hammer.
I'm afraid of the guy coming at me with a hammer. So
Right,
fear
right.
ultimately breaks down to survival, whether it's mentally or bodily, physiological or psychological.
Right.
So I think most people, and myself included, fear failure because they ultimately believe it could boil down to them experiencing mental or physical threats. And what I mean by that, an example is, if I fail at this business and I risk it all, I won't be able to eat, sleep, drink. Okay, so that's the physiological side of it.
Okay.
Or if mentally, if I fail at this business, race, whatever it is, people will perceive me as a lesser person in comparison to what they think I could be. And that would affect me psychologically. They judge you for failing despite trying. So, back to your question, I think more people fear the the psychological aspect of failure than the physiological in this day and age.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. I definitely. That's the part of failure that really gets to me is that
Yeah.
I go for something and then I don't achieve it, and then in my head I'm thinking people will think to themselves, "Oh, yeah, he didn't do it. Didn't make it. Couldn't do what he wanted to do. That's bummer. Another one bites the dust." Like that's definitely
And another one bites the dust.
right, that's definitely something that I think about. That uh that's the fear. That's the true fear, not the fear of my like physical well-being, you know.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of a psychological thing for the fear of failure portion. But for failure itself, do you have, like, let's try to get concrete with it. Do you have an
Mhm.
example of a time you have failed, and did any of those fears come into fruition, or did it turn out a different way than you thought when you failed?
Yeah, I would say in terms of the psychological aspect of that, I failed relative to a goal I had that was also aligned with a goal or perception that someone else had of me. So, my
Hmm.
example in this is when I was going through the whole lacrosse recruiting process, I was targeting really high level caliber schools. And one of them that's sticks out to me is Notre Dame. My
Mm-hmm.
mom went to the sister school of Notre Dame, and that would have been a really cool dream school to go to. And I remember I got invited to a prospect day, and I trained for probably 2 or 3 months beforehand. Just that was kind of the picture, like, hey, I'm doing this to perform at that level. And my mom and dad kept reinforcing it. And a byproduct of that was I also wanted to achieve that. And I remember that didn't happen. So
Mm-hmm.
I did not go to Notre Dame. uh, and that is that was a failure, hypothetically,
Right.
because I did not achieve what the goal I had set out to accomplish.
Yeah. Your goal was to play lacrosse at Notre Dame, and you did not play lacrosse at Notre Dame.
Exactly. However, when I look back on it now, I think I had more. I think the actual goal of playing lacrosse at Notre Dame was not as much my goal as it was to play lacrosse at a D1 school,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting to me to think. And I don't know if my parents had that vision of me that if I didn't play lacrosse at Notre Dame, I was a failure, and I'm sure they didn't. But I think I put more weight on the fact that, hey, if I reach this accomplishment of playing lacrosse at Notre Dame, I will be seen as more of a success compared to playing lacrosse at a D1 school, but maybe a lower tier. You know,
Gotcha. So it was more, it was that perception aspect that was driving the goal.
yeah. And I think as a backdrop of this entire episode, and we should preface this, is that physiological versus psychological, we are going to be focused way more on the psychological because today I would argue that 99% of the time it is not physiological. Most people either have or have the ability to cover their basic needs, so food, sleep, and water, in almost no time at all. There's very little people that cannot go out and get a job at McDonald's.
Right.
Okay.
At least in our country.
Yes. Yes. True.
At least, yeah, at least here, at least in our specific, I would say, our specific environment.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And I mean, anyone individually, there's definitely, they have their own lives and their own struggles
Yeah.
and those backgrounds as well. But yeah, I would say the fear itself is not because it's not driving your fear of the fear of not being able to know if you're going to survive the next day, have water to drink, have have a somewhere to sleep wherever it is, have any food throughout the day. That's not what's holding people back in their goals. That's not the fear that's gripping you down and holding you down. We're saying that it's more of a psychological, emotional block, a mental block that we're having.
Exactly. So a mindset. Hopefully, at the end of this, both you and I, and anyone listening, can start to make the progression to overcoming that mental block and shifting their mindset.
Right. Totally. Well, okay, let's talk about your mindset after you got the news that you failed getting into Notre Dame. How did that affect you when you didn't hit that, when that was what you wanted to happen?
Yeah, going back to what I said on what I think my actual goal was, and I think my actual goal was more playing lacrosse at a D1 school as opposed to playing lacrosse at Notre Dame. So for
Right.
me, I don't think it impacted me as much personally because I knew I still had other options.
Oh, okay, I see. Because you went
And
to Richmond.
yeah, so I don't think that was as much as of a hit to me personally as it was to how I perceived it to be a hit to myself and my parents,
Gotcha.
if you get what I mean by that. So I think
Hmm.
the combined weight of my mom, my dad, and me was more of a hit as opposed to just me not playing at Notre Dame.
Right. But yeah, that's exactly the point, that it was less of the actual goal, but it was more of the psychological repercussions of wanting to get that and why you wanted to get that. Did you have pressure? Was there pressure on you for that specific school from peers, family, or was it more D1 from other people?
No, my parents were. I love my parents, and the way they raised me was great because they never said you should or you have to go to XYZ school. Their emphasis was more work hard so you have the opportunity to choose XYZ, X, Y, or Z school. And growing up, we can definitely interpret that wrong. It's yeah, and I think that's what I did was, hey, you should work hard because you have this thing coming up. So, which was the Notre Dame prospect camp. So
Mm-hmm.
I put more weight on the actual wording and the that angle of the prospect camp being Notre Dame as opposed to the process of just working hard so I have the options.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I
I think
follow that.
I misconstrued that just because I was younger and less mature.
Gotcha. Okay, well how did you take this? Did Was this a big learning lesson for you? Was this a stepping stone? Did you have any revelations in this that made you go, "Oh, okay, here's how I can turn this failure into a success," or this was the true root of what was actually going on here?
Yeah, and that mindset has followed me not incredibly consistently because I've definitely faltered in certain ways on my journey to where I am now. But the biggest thing I learned was that there is a very high volume of work that needs to be put in order to achieve the goals you want to reach,
Mhm.
especially when it's at such a high caliber competitive level.
Right.
Because one, there's a ton of other people competing there. And two, the standards to get to that level are so much higher. So you have to raise your level to those standards. And no one's going to drop their standards so that you can get there. It's you have to meet them there. And then if you want to keep going above that, once you go above that, then you can reset the standards. But there is never an instance where you're shooting for a goal or shooting for something where you don't first have to match the standards of work that is required to get to the level of where you want to be. And that
Yeah.
that goes for athletics, for business, for even personal development or anything you're trying to pursue in life.
Yeah, totally. So on this point, did you have a revelation? Do you think that you didn't work hard enough?
Going into it, no.
Okay.
I I felt that actually I take that back. Being honest with myself and especially what I know I can do now, yes, I did not work hard enough. I may have thought that I was working hard or as hard as I could have leading up to that moment because I mean I was still waking up early and doing drills in the morning and then going to practice and then working out again at night, but the I could have done more.
Right.
So looking back on it, yes, I had I done 10 more minutes here, 10 more minutes here, or taken away from a little socialization here or a little socialization there or some other event where I was not dedicating my time towards that goal, yes, I could have been more prepared.
Yeah, and you always can be. You can always look back on anything and say to yourself, I could have done more. I have that. I could have gotten better grades in high school. I got good grades. I could have gotten better grades. I could have worked harder. You
Yep.
know, I even especially in college, I could have worked harder. I could have gotten better grades. I could have applied to more jobs early on. I could have gone to more career fairs at college. I could have there's so much we all could have done in things, especially upon retrospect. So I when I think to myself of that, it's I can beat myself up easily. You know, it can be annoying to myself when I think, oh, okay, there was more I could have done to reach this goal. I didn't get an A in a class. And I'm like, okay, I could have if I really wanted to. And sometimes I beat myself up, but also it's just, okay, I think to myself, I could have. I'm identifying that. I could have put harder work into it. That's over. This is the past now. We're reflecting. So I need to think that I could have worked harder and know that in whatever next ambition that I have. Think back to the times when I had an outcome where I thought to myself I could have worked harder and remember that going into ambitions in the future. Saying to myself, okay, well, there have been times I thought I could have worked harder, which means I need to work extremely hard right now. And I need to constantly ask myself, am I doing enough? Because then I can say, okay, I am working as hard as I can. And then even after that, Patrick, we're gonna look back and say I could have worked harder, right? You ran an Ironman. Do you I bet you could look back and say I could have trained more. I bet you could, right?
Yes.
Technically. I'm not
Yep.
saying you didn't put in the training and didn't do a good job, but if you're gonna get nitty and gritty, I'm sure you could have put in an extra hour on a certain day, or you could have
Yeah.
done something more. You can always do more.
And here's some of our previous episodes. We have talked about balance,
Hmm.
and this is where this will conflict because there are certain things in your life that you may have to sacrifice balance in order to achieve, and that is your preference. But with these goals we have and overcoming the fear of failure, there are things you're going to have to sacrifice if they are important enough to you. And I said this in the last episode, but we have to choose our pain and struggle and the regrets that come with our choices. So if I were to focus, I was probably putting in, I don't know, 20 to, or no, probably 30 to 40 hours a week training for an Ironman, right? And that's
Hmm.
encompassing training, food, sleep. No, well, not sleep, but training, food, stretching. If I were to do an extra 5 hours a week, what would I have to sacrifice in other aspects of my life in order to do that? And is that sacrifice of those other things in my life going to give me a higher return than the things I would be sacrificing would?
Hmm.
And I think that comes down to there's a really powerful quote. I forget the podcast I was just listening to. Might have been from Chris Williamson, but you have to choose your regrets because if you choose to pursue one thing, that also means that you are giving up the ability to pursue another thing. So
Right.
if you are choosing between path A and B, what path, if you do not choose, can you live with the regret of not choosing that?
Right. So you're talking about budgeting your time. So I just started a monthly budget for finances, and
Okay.
it's almost doing the same thing, but rather than the currency being money, it's your time. So
Exactly.
so you're kind of picking how much of your time you want to budget in to certain things throughout your day. Because yeah, and a specific goal right now, let's say career, just in general career. Let's put that in a category. Yeah,
Yep.
if you budget all your time into that and make time for nothing else, then yeah, you're going to get some results and you're going to be able to say, yes, I am working as hard as humanly possible. I am doing everything in my ability to do that. Great. But okay, that's not really a healthy budget because there's a lot of other categories to fill. There's relationships, your friends and family. There's leisure, hobbies. There's relaxing because that stuff's also important to me too. So it's kind of what I'm trying to figure out right now is how much of that can I afford in specific categories? Because lately I have been very balls to the wall, it feels like. And like it feels like my back is against the wall for the past few months living on get by and survive and also focus on establishing myself and make a career. But I'm also thinking, okay, haven't made a lot of time for friends and family. I haven't relaxed a ton compared to what I usually do. And I've noticed it affect my mood as well a little bit.
Yeah, that was another thing I want to bring up, and it's almost similar to economic. Actually, it is economics. There's an
Yeah.
opportunity cost. So another principle in economics is marginal utility, right? So if I were to draw a curve, you get, and say it's career, you get a bunch of return, a bunch of return, a bunch of return, and then it starts decreasing or increasing at a decreasing rate.
Hmm.
Eventually, it's going to reach a peak, right? So you can't go higher than that peak. So say you're putting in 10 hours a day towards career. If you put that 11th hour in, that could tip your mental state, that could tip your relationship, that could cause a domino effect in the other aspects of your life. And that is where I think there's the balance. Is where are you going to portion your time to where you are continually getting a return on every aspect of your life? And it
Yeah.
could be it could be at the peak, it could be between the peak and the middle, and it just depends on how fast you want to grow in that aspect.
Yeah. Totally. And I think that's a trial and error process too to figure out where we fit on that curve. What cost is worth what. And you got to learn the hard way too. Like I have because there's no way I can just know. I don't know where to budget everything. I have to learn where to budget everything by starting somewhere and realizing what's working and what's not. And then you readjust.
Yeah. So I guess going back to failure on this, and a question I have for you is, do you think most people care if you fail?
No, I thought about this too when we were talking about doing this episode. I don't think so. Cuz at least for me, I don't really care that much when other people fail. You know what I'm saying? If you called me before you ran the Ironman and said I had to drop out of the race, I'm deciding I'm not doing it, I wouldn't think, "Oh, what a loser, what a failure." I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I really it's not my life either. I wouldn't have even cared that much. I would have raised an eyebrow and kind of questioned what the hell happened because I know you. I would have been shocked to get that phone call or get that news. But no, I wouldn't have held it against you. I wouldn't have. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have even cared that much.
Yeah.
You would have cared more than anyone else in the world if you ended up not running that Ironman.
Exactly. That's the point I was going to get to,
Yeah.
is because when you fail, most people, and I thought about this, is, oh, at least you tried. Or, oh, don't worry, look at all the work you did put in. But
Yeah.
you're usually your harshest critic. You have to live with what you did or did not do. So, can you live with that decision that you had never even attempted to fail or try?
Yeah. Uh no.
Well, there's the simple answer, folks. No.
All right. Thanks for coming on, guys. That's it. I-
Uh,
yeah. Well, okay, yeah, I'll elaborate on that a little bit. But no, it would be very hard. And but it's me, right? It's what I want. It's my life. Like, for example, I want to have an established career in entertainment. And whether that's getting to work on crew, which I'm trying to do right now, or if it's acting and helping tell a story. As long as I want to help tell a story. I want to be a contributor in that, in a story that makes people feel that fills people with emotions no matter what those emotions are. Like, I love that stuff. That's where so much of my inspiration comes from, right?
yep.
Like, you know what makes me want to go work out more than anything in the world? A boxing movie. You know what I'm saying? You know what makes me want to put myself out there um, socially more than anything? It's when I watch a movie where the protagonist puts themselves out there and does something crazy. And that inspires me and it makes me feel. And there's so many and just themes in general. I love themes. That's stuff makes me passionate. And that's stuff that I want to do. And if it doesn't work
Well,
out, no one's going to care more than me.
yeah,
I think
because
if
it's
I
something
texted
internal.
you and my friends and said, "Hey guys, I don't want to do entertainment anymore. I don't want to be in this industry at all." I couldn't do it. Not I don't want to be in it anymore. I couldn't do it. I failed. So I'm on this track now. I don't think any of you guys would talk behind my back and make fun of me for being a failure. You just say, "Okay, he's on a different track now," right?
Yeah, that's ultimately that's what would happen because most people, most people's problems are their problems, and they don't have time to think about your problems or your failures. Their head is so full of the things that they're thinking about
Right.
that as as maybe uncompassionate as this sounds, they don't have the space or the time to worry about the things you're worrying about too. That's unless you are in a relationship and about to get married, maybe your burdens are not going to be carried by other people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because I'm thinking about that now. It's it's interesting because I think sometimes I forget that everyone thinks the same way that I do to a degree. And by that I mean perception wise, sometimes I feel like I'm on everyone's mind always. And not like oh, like he's the protagonist of his life, like 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 how people say that about people. It's not that. It's this random pressure I'm putting in my head, right? Like, oh, like I'm not doing this right now. Everyone's judging me for not doing something that I know I'm supposed to be doing right now, when everyone else is actually focused on what they need to be doing right now.
I forget what this that paradox is called because there is actually a psychological uh, definition for that, and it's that if you are thinking other people are thinking of you, 99% of the time they're not. It's
Right.
just it's just a notion that we make up in our heads.
Yeah, totally. It's a fear, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the fear. You're like, oh, if I don't, if I don't, okay, I was about to say if I don't show up to work today, yeah, people would care about that one. That's something people would care about. Okay, here's one. If I don't work out this morning, no one besides me really gives a shit if I work out. You know, no,
Yep.
no one. If you didn't work out tomorrow, Patrick, I wouldn't be thinking about if you told me, I'd be like, okay, weird. Patrick didn't work out. That's not like him. But then I would continue on my day. you know,
Yeah.
no one's holding you accountable.
Yep.
We have to I'm really just holding myself accountable. But sometimes I feel like I'm being held accountable by other people. Like if I don't work out tomorrow, like oh, like Cole will be like, what the hell? But he's probably just worried about him working out and him and what he's doing at work, or and other people too. It's the same way, you know?
Well, I think you can use other people or your opinion. Let me see how to phrase this. You can use the thought of other people judging you as a motivator to work out or to start. But
Yeah.
actual accountability for whatever you are trying to do or whatever your goal is happens in the dark. It is internal, and you have to you have to come to terms with reality on the actual amount of work and what work you have to do in order to reach that goal, because at the end of the day no one really cares.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And is that healthy though? Because we're kind of getting back to the intrinsic extrinsic, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think you use it as an action starter, right? You should
okay.
not. I think the best example here is the guy who goes, the semi unfit guy who's pudgy or fat, who goes starts going to the gym to get girls, right?
Hmm.
And that might be the thing he needs to get going to the gym, but as he has his body continue to transform, he feels a little better. Hopefully, he is not just using that to get the girl, because if that happens and he's doing it for the wrong reason, once he gets the girl, then he has a higher chance of stopping lifting or working out,
Yeah.
and then he'll revert back to his old state. So you have to use whatever you have, whether it's hatred, motivation, or hatred, jealousy, insecurity, whatever, to start. But know that if you keep using that gas throughout whatever you're trying to achieve, it is
Hmm.
going to burn you in the end of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's because that starts to take a huge toll. Like that gets pretty toxic fast.
Yep.
Fast, why did I say it like that? but
Jazzy.
but but quickly, right? Because and also there have been times. I'll say this. My I would say I was least worried about that kind of stuff of extrinsic things like in the middle of college, and I wasn't really going to the gym a lot, you know. So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm fine." Like I wasn't insecure about how I looked or anything. Like I was doing well socially with people. I was doing better than I ever had with girls in the past. So I was feeling good and I wasn't going to the gym as much. And I think it was because in the past when I was working out, I was doing exactly that. I was only going for like that approval of others, which I know we're steering from failure a little bit. We're kind of
Yeah.
we're kind of talking about stuff we've covered in past episodes, but I think it is good to cover just
Yeah,
real
for
quickly.
sure. I guess going back to failure, and even that still connects this point of why you do what you do and how long you do it. As I was prepping for this episode and thinking about these things, in some instances, I actually think failure is just giving up. And it's
Yeah,
not really the the act of comparison. Like compared to Jack, compared to your sister, you're a failure. Okay? It's you have not spent enough time and you don't have a long enough time horizon allocated to whatever you're going after to achieve success. So by giving up, you're just you are just failing. And if you stay persistent enough, you can succeed.
yeah, but there's also sometimes there actually is just failure for an easy way that I'm thinking of this. A game where there's a winner and a loser, and there's very strict rules. Let's say you're a football coach. Let's say you're an NFL football coach. You know, okay, Bill Belichick. Let's get specific. So for non-NFL listeners, that's the Patriots coach
Yeah.
of the New England Patriots. Super successful coach, won many Super Bowls, but he's also gone to the Super Bowl and lost. And by definition, he failed that year, right? His goal is as coach is to win the games. So
Yes.
whenever he loses a game, no matter when it is, that's a failure. And I think what we're getting at is that that fail, yes, it's a failure by definition, but that doesn't mean it's over. That doesn't mean give up. That doesn't mean let it get to you and just let yourself stay there in that mentality.
Yes. Yes. On a relative basis, on a short term basis, that is a failure. The only way I think he ultimately fails is if he lost, say it was his first Super Bowl ever as a coach, if he lost that first Super Bowl and then gave up, he the only thing he could have as a reference is the failure in that Super Bowl. However,
Mm-hmm.
he kept going. He used that relative failure in the short term and compounded the lessons he learned along the journey to the Super Bowl to go back time and time again as one of the most successful coaches in the history of the NFL.
Right.
So it, and I think that is consistency. The way to guarantee that you will fail is to not be consistent in the things that you say you're going to do and the work that needs to be done in order to achieve what you want to. For example, this podcast, relative to other people, we aren't as successful, but the only way we guarantee failure if we're trying to reach, say, a million listeners, whatever it is we stop,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think about that. The podcast, yeah, let's talk about that for sure. And the realm of failure, because even if not all of our episodes have increased exponentially, right?
mm.
Our curve for listeners doesn't go like that. We'd like that to happen.
Yeah.
We'd like listenership to double or triple every time we drop an episode, but we don't. In fact, even sometimes we've released an episode that hasn't done as well as the week before. That's happened too.
Mm-hmm.
And by definition, if in that comparison or whatever our goals are, then yeah, that you could say, okay, we failed that week. But I don't look at it that way. I acknowledge that okay, by definition, that's a failure. But I still just, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we're going to keep going. And we're going to think how we can do better on the next episode or what we can do better to improve. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard, like to actually figure out how we relate statistics and numbers to that. That's more personal for us, but
Well, I think it's a good reference because
yeah,
for everyone listening, we are using that information and that data to learn, to improve.
right,
So by failing, we're learning. But by failing in the short term, we're learning in the long run to hopefully win in the long run.
right,
And being willing to fail, I think, means recognizing those things that from those failures you can tweak and the task you need to complete in order to grow and doing them to the best of your ability, despite not knowing what the outcome will be. So, for example, everyone, Jack and I have recently just implemented this little phrase at the top of every episode. What are the one or two things we're going to improve this episode?
yeah,
So last one, it was okay, our camera, so our video quality, hopefully if you're listening or watching on Instagram or YouTube, it's a lot
yeah,
better. Same with our audio quality. So we improved two things. This one is our attentiveness and our act and our body language is a lot more active. And
right,
hopefully when we're watching this, I hope that we get that feedback, but also hearing and seeing the feedback from you guys, not only from people reaching out, but also the amount of viewership, if we're looking at a number base, how that those little improvements impact that.
yeah, totally. Yeah, that's actually when we do the feedback stuff at the end and ask for it. It's not just like, oh, like give us your thoughts, but it also we do that because then we could say, okay, what do people want? What's gonna get people invested in listening? And like, and for anyone listening that does want to get feedback, for us, that's literally the best thing anyone could ever do for us to help us improve. To have, for example, if you look at it like a business, the client's literally telling you what they want, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. That's great. And you say, okay, but this is what our clients want, then let's do that. Because, we're just trying to figure out what works
Yeah.
entirely too, and how to format it and things like that.
What works for us, what you guys want to hear too, and beyond the baseline foundation that we enjoy talking about these things, but we also want, based on the feedback that we have gotten, we know that there can be a positive impact out of it based on the things that people want to hear.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
and I think that one thing I really, not only for myself and for you,
Mm-hmm.
as a kind of quote or constant reminder, it's that by even trying, you can't fail, because you're just succeeding as a byproduct of the feedback you're getting to grow as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also depends on who we're talking to, about because really to sum this all up, if we wanted to do this episode in 2 sentences, I would say if you keep not doing things because you're worried about the outcome, that's worse than not doing it. Just do it. Just try things. And that's the end of the episode. That's just do shit. God.
Yeah.
Catch you next week. but in the
Boom.
long run,
Life
that's
lessons from Jack.
but like that is kind of what we're getting at in a nutshell, right? It's like, yeah, the worry of failure, the worry of things not working out. Well, if you're not doing things, or if you're not trying to get what you want to get, do what you want to do because of that, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because guess what? What you're doing there, coming up with those excuses, that's worse than not even trying. Because
Ooh.
you're definitely not going to succeed if you're not even doing anything.
Yeah, you made me, you reminded me of a really good point I wanted to talk about too. And I just heard this definition called anxiety cost. So we have opportunity
Oh,
cost, anxiety cost. I thought this was really good. It's the cost that it's the cost of time that we spend worrying about what we should be doing instead of actually going out and doing the thing.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And
And I do that, dude. I do
yeah,
that all the
so do
time.
I.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And the little
if we,
things, right? Asking a girl out, right? I bet
oh my God.
so many guys have that. Like, oh my God, like she asked this girl out. Then you get the anxiety cost, right? You're thinking about what could happen if
Oh,
she
what's she
says
gonna
yes or
think? What's
no.
her
And
friends gonna
then,
think?
yeah, exactly. Totally.
And then it just spirals. So that is something that I've definitely been trying to work on, is decreasing the time between when I think I'm going to do something and when I go and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
It's good to jump in the water. Also, one thing that I've learned exactly on this fear of failure thing, because like I have asked girls out where it's been a no. Well, not a no, but they're like, "Oh, I'm busy." And you're like, "Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, yes, sure you are.
I have a
Cool."
boyfriend.
I've
Maybe.
gotten that. That happened to me once.
Did you
But
know she didn't have a boyfriend?
no, I didn't. Come on, Pat.
Oh, I didn't know. Well, I mean,
No,
she
I
could have
did.
had a
I did not
boyfriend.
know. Yeah. No. Oh no. She did have a boyfriend. I just didn't know she had a boyfriend.
Oh, see, that's that.
Yeah.
I was thinking she was using it as an excuse, like, oh, I have a
Oh,
boyfriend.
gotcha. Yeah,
It's like,
which
I know you don't, you little liar. You could have just told me.
right, which could have happened. But here's what I think of with that, even if it didn't work out, or if it was a no without it being a no. Here's my process. Like, well, at least it's better than not asking the girl at all, even if it is a no. Especially if you handle it with confidence. Because then at least you're at least in her head, like, oh wow, he got after it though. He asked me out and he doesn't even seem phased by the no. That's way better
Yeah,
than just not doing it at all, even if it's a no. Like when that happened to me once, I felt really good about the no because I was thinking, well, I mean, yeah, but I asked her. And there's plenty of guys that have probably wanted to ask that girl out that have not, right?
dude, that's a great point. That I would love to hear a girl's perspective from this
I know.
because,
That would be so interesting, actually.
yeah, when you know that, say it is a girl with a boyfriend or a girl that just is not ready for a relationship, what does she think as a result of a guy approaching her with confidence and just going after it? Is And I think you're right. I would say that, oh, I appreciate him recognizing me for being it is physical attractiveness, being beautiful, and that made me feel good.
Right.
So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. But I think I have to be confident about the no too, because like, let's be honest, you have to show that it doesn't really phase you. Because if you show that, then the girl's like, "Oh, okay, what the hell? Like, this guy asked me out, I said no, and then he doesn't care, and now he's at the bar talking to other girls. Did I talk to other girls at the bar knowing that that girl was there, so she would see me talking to other girls? That could have happened. I don't know, but
Jesus.
I could have done that. But I saw the girl looking over, kind of wondering, oh, okay,
He moved on.
yeah.
What
And
did I
then all
miss
this,
out on?
yeah, exactly. She's thinking now, right? She's thinking, even if it wasn't an initial interest, she's
Jack is
thinking.
playing games out
I
here.
this was the past me. This was the old me. I don't do this stuff anymore. Because that is immature. That behavior is immature. That is playing games. I shouldn't have been doing that. I will fully admit that. That's I have realized that that was not the most mature way to handle it. Did it work? Yes. Should I have done it? No.
That's awesome.
I think I talked about that. I don't know why I'm bringing this up because this is my least favorite thing we have reeled is the thing where I talked about the simp stuff.
Oh, yeah. The
But
Simp King,
yeah,
or
but
whatever it
that
was.
to clarify for anyone that saw that reel, this what I'm saying to that of me being elevated simp. I'm saying that yeah, I know. I mean, I should coin that term. I love that term. But what I'm saying is, I'm not. I'm shooting myself in the foot right now, but I'm saying that me playing those games, doing stuff like that, like talking to other girls so the other girl would get a little jealous and get in her head a little bit. That's being still simpy in my mind of doing that stuff because that's also saying, okay, you like from my end, okay, I still want her attention slash approval. If I really asked around, she said no, and I was that confident where I came across, I didn't really care. I wouldn't even be thinking about playing those games. You know what I'm saying? Because
Exactly.
I actually would be so confident that it didn't phase me. So I would just move on and I wouldn't even worry about having to play those games. And that's why I describe that as being an elevated simp because I am still letting it get to me.
And
I learned methods to kind of make it work, or like, like to actually kind of get in the girl's head, but it was still, I still look at that as simp behavior of when I was doing that because I wasn't, it means I cared. If I'm willing to play games like that, it means I care.
yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Glad I could clarify that.
Yeah.
Glad
Don't
we
clip
got
this
there.
and take it out of context 10 years down the road.
Like the last clip. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think your action in those circumstances, barring the elevated simp part of it, is
Yeah.
you as a man now can go back and look at, hey, I've done that before. And even though I got the no, did it really affect me that much? So your
No, not at
actions
all.
are proof that you can do other things and overcome failure. So whether it's in sports, in relationships, in business, the pure the pure event of taking action gives you building blocks to continue growing in whatever field you're pursuing, relationships, business, athletics. And I think that's a huge confidence booster because your self-esteem and your self-confidence is not based on the things that you tell yourself in your head. Your self-confidence is based on your evidence of the actions you've taken in the past.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a phrase I do all the time on this podcast, by the way. Totally agree. That's my little niche statement. Sorry, continuing though.
I totally
Continuing.
agree.
But I would say the I like the little goals too. And the the success of make the goal to try and don't look at the outcome or the consequence of trying as failure or success. Like to bring it to a simple thing like asking someone out on a date, the goal is just to ask, right? If
Yeah.
it's a no, it's a no. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a failure. Like, is it technically rejection? Yes, but it's still beneficial to you.
Internally, you
Yeah,
succeeded as a byproduct of the action.
right. Because at least you asked, you know? Because I bet you were thinking for like a week whether or not you should do that. And maybe you wouldn't have even gotten the balls to do it. At least you did that, right? That's a success. Asking versus not asking, right?
You
You got
you
to
will
start
guar-
somewhere. You got
you
to
will
start somewhere.
guaranteed get a no if you don't ask.
Yeah, exactly. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Boom.
it's but
Episode
it's
on failure. Life lessons from Jack
yeah.
Mullen.
But like that's totally what we're getting at. And like we know that. People we hear that. I've heard that plenty of times. But then when actually applying it, you don't always do it. I've
Oh
heard
yeah.
that phrase, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take since I was 12.
Yeah.
And I've and forever. And I've not listened to it always. I've still like not taken the shot in my life because it's hard. It's just kind of helpful to really talk about it, especially with concrete examples.
Yeah, and I do have some questions for you on this,
Yeah.
especially related to the actions you take and how and those events that comprise of who you are and what you define as success. So,
Hmm.
one of the things I always think about is what traits and experiences make up the man you want to be or the success you want to achieve.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's shift the vibe because that was a really serious question.
Sorry.
So specific, you said traits and experiences.
Yeah.
Traits and all right. I need to start. I guess I'll start with traits. And yeah, I would say being the guy that goes for it is definitely a trait I want to have. Which is kind of like why I'm glad we're talking about this for this episode because even now, I really need to remember that. I need to remember that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take lesson. Even though that sounds cheesy, it's a cheesy way to put it, but I need to apply that to everything. I need to apply in reaching out to people for potential employers and for jobs and things like that. Just remember, if you don't reach out, you're definitely not gonna get a response. Cold calling is the worst thing in the whole entire world. Cold calling's awful. Have you cold called before, Patrick?
Oh
It's
yeah.
terrible. It's a horrible, horrible feeling. But if I got a cold call from someone, if someone called us, was like, "Hey, I listen to the podcast. You guys need any help?" Someone cold called us, even in a
I'd be
certain situation, like if they wanted us to pay them, we're not a place where we can do that. Like we'd say, "Oh, thanks for reaching out," but no. But wouldn't you be really impressed that someone called us, just went for it, reached out to us?
yeah, because most of the people as even famous people as as much reach as they have, I don't think they get as many cold calls or outreach as people think. Now, obviously, the Uber Kim Kardashians and public figures of the world, they probably do.
Right.
But the people that are uber wealthy or have high status, I would argue that most of them don't get the amount of volume of reach out that you would expect.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I totally agree, actually.
It's it's game theory with uh, what's that?
The
Russell Crowe.
movie, yeah,
Yeah.
Beautiful
So
Mind.
yeah, so Beautiful Mind. That's what it is. His whole game theory and where he came up with it, that bar scene, right?
Right,
It's everyone is so afraid to go for the 10 of the girls
right.
because, or no, wait, that's not game theory. But anyway,
Yeah, it was.
it's not
The
game
movie
theory,
wasn't
but
perfectly accurate. I remember
yeah,
my econ professor talked about it, like that's not exactly how it is, but it's a fun movie. But
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is more people are afraid of going for the zenith thing. So
Right,
there's actually less competition at the top
right.
or at the thing you're trying to reach out for,
Hmm.
which is really interesting to me. And I think doing the actual reach out just takes the mindset chip. And I know we talked about it at the beginning. The whole purpose of this episode is to shift our mindset around failure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I think that's a big part of it because it's so hard to do that sometimes. I think sometimes it's so easy to say it in advice, but like before I reach out to somebody that has no idea who I am, where I'm like, hey, for example, I reached out just recently to an audio studio that does post production for movies. They do sound. They score the movies, put in the sound effects, that
mhm.
stuff. There's still that little like my heartbeat gets faster, my heart starts racing a little bit. I just emailed. I didn't even cold call. And you know what? I should have cold called. Looking back, I should do it more. But it is actually hard to do it. When you're actually doing it and you say it and you're like, yes, of course, I should. Yeah, I should just do it. But when push comes to shove, it's not easy. So I acknowledge that for myself and like other people listening. Like it's hard. It's not easy to do that stuff.
Yeah, it's a
But I do need to remember that it's other people are probably experiencing the same thing that are reaching out. And some of them might not do it because of that. Like, okay, I'm not going to do that. That might be weird. I've had that concern. People might think I'm weird reaching out. I feel like sometimes, like, I get in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm just, some kid trying to reach out. Like, kind of feel like I kind of roll my eyes at myself at that notion a little bit. But one, actually have something to offer for when you are reaching out, you know, actually,
hey.
yeah. Have something to offer. And if you have something to offer and you're polite, respectful, then if that person judges you for that, okay, whatever. That's on them because you didn't do anything wrong.
They
I
don't
didn't
belong
do
in your
anything
life.
wrong by reaching out. And even if I don't get a response, which that's happened more than I have. I've reached out to so many people and places and companies and I've gotten nothing. But, you know, it's better than not reaching out at all because sometimes people do respond.
Yeah. And the the thing I love and the quotes by Alex Ramosi, and I think we've talked about this in a prior episode, is
Yeah.
oftentimes in 2 weeks, people will forget your name.
Yeah.
And in 2 months, people are going to forget you ever existed.
Yeah.
So if someone remembering you for 2 weeks is going to impact the potential trajectory you can take in your life, then why care? If they're not going to be with you for the rest of your life, then why care about it for 2 weeks?
Yeah. Totally. I had an unrealistic fear on this. What was the anxiety complex what was the phrase?
Anxiety cost?
The anxiety cost. Yeah. I was focusing. So here was an actual fear that I came up with in my mind of why I shouldn't reach out to so many people. Because I was wondering, what if all these different companies in the same industry put together who I am? That literally entered my mind. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is an insane thing. That would never happen. But I was literally thinking of that because, for example, I was reaching out to, this is actually kind of funny. I was reaching out to some of the acting agencies, like talent agencies and management companies down here.
Hmm.
And the actors are all on strike right now.
Yeah.
So it's the worst time to be reaching out. And I even I phrased it as like, I was just going to offer some free part-time assistance to these people because they're
Yeah.
bleeding right now. So I was like, no one's hiring. And it would be naive of me to ask them for a job. It's like, okay, you want to be in this industry and you're asking for a job right now. You don't even know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about that. So that was kind of how I phrased it, some free help. And like only a couple responded. They were basically like, yeah, we're sorry. Like we're struggling right now. And I was like, they're like, yeah, all of our clients are currently not working at all. So we're,
That's so rough.
which is rough. Yeah. They're bleeding. And once it goes in 2024, they'll get into some financial trouble. It's actually pretty bad.
That's not good.
But yeah, I literally had a fear that all the talent agencies were gonna be like, hey, did you guys get reached out to that guy too? And that they
Yeah.
were all gonna
Yeah.
talk and blacklist me from the talent agencies. I had that thought enter my mind that could happen if I reach out to all these places.
Yeah. I think, whoops, I think everyone has gone through that making up a ridiculous scenario.
Yeah, totally.
I definitely have when I was going through recruiting or something like, or networking. It's like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, this kid's everywhere. Like he's so annoying.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
now that we're in a little bit, or at least I'm in a position where some people have maybe started reaching out for advice just because of the nature of the business world that I'm in. I can assure you and assure myself now that, oh, when people do this, I don't give two shits because I have way bigger problems than
Right, right.
Joe John over here reaching out on a random Wednesday, seeing if he wants to talk for 15 minutes. Sure, I'll talk to you for 15 minutes. And most of the time, it's hopefully going to get some information or maybe you can provide some value, but most people are not gonna care.
Yeah,
So
totally. And I also thought that uh I have an example on both sides for the restaurant that I'm serving at right now. I I know I talked to you like specifically about this that I kept reaching out. Like I was nagging and I felt so I hated it because I hate being naggy and constantly reaching out. But I eventually did get the job. And if I didn't continue to nag, I wouldn't have gotten it. Because now I'm in there, right? And sometimes I have answered the phone and it's someone calling about looking for a job at the restaurant. And
ah,
and so one, sometimes they call when it's pretty busy. And I at least do them the service when I talk to them like, hey man, thanks for calling. I don't know if we're looking to hire or not. We are busy right now. I would call in the middle of the afternoon after lunch before dinner so you can talk to more people. I have actually, so I will at least give people that to like kind of
yeah,
help them out on when to call. But I look back, like I don't remember any of their names. Anyone that has called, I don't remember a single person that's called. And it's better to call than not to call, right? You know,
yep,
like being on the other side, and I just liked one of the guys that I talked to, and I told him I was like, be relentless. I was like, if you want to get it, just keep calling, come in. I was like, come in person, like
yeah,
get your face in the door. And like I got that advice from my dad too. And like sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should do that. Like they're probably busy, making all those excuses in my head, those scenarios. But you should just be relentless. And it's the fear of failure, right? The fear of judgment of others. That's what's been holding me back from that.
yeah, man, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Keep talking.
uh,
I need to plug my computer in real quick, but keep going.
okay, yeah, I love that advice, and the points you make are very valid in any industry and any pursuit that you are trying to make. So this is all leading back to little things that so many people, including myself and yourself, make up in their mind, but are just figments of what we think is actually happening in reality. And it's just not true. It's our brain has little funny ways of making those little things up, and we just need to ignore them. Keep moving and say, what action do I need to take? So
Yeah.
that's the mindset shift I'm working on every day because I'm not perfect at it. And
Yeah.
that I hope
It's hard. And I don't think it'll ever stop
reinforces.
being stressful, And there's nothing, at least the way my brain works, that'll stop those intrusive thoughts of scenarios from at least happening. I just need to remember to block those out, you know. Like
Yeah.
I need to recognize, okay, that's my mind creating a scenario. And if I say it out loud, it's probably ridiculous.
Yeah. And it'll get easier and you will make those decisions faster the more evidence you give yourself.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Yeah,
well,
cool,
man,
cool. Yeah, should we
this
start to
is,
wrap it? It went a while.
yeah,
I
this
didn't
was great.
realize.
Yeah, there are a lot of good little tips in here
Yeah.
from, I think, both of us and both realizations that we
Yeah, dude,
had.
I kind of had a couple light bulb moments throughout this episode. I was
You
like,
bitch.
"Oh, yeah. I am in my own way."
Yeah.
That's I
Uh,
that's usually the biggest roadblock is yourself. And
I-
yeah,
yeah,
I have that.
100%. And it's even, I guess, one last point. It's so interesting when I'm doing the prep for these episodes and thinking about the different scenarios because I think about it as today with what we have with what we have access to compared to people in our parents' generation. And I'm not saying it was easier, but they had less distractions on what could potentially happen.
Yeah.
We now have access to a whole catalog of if you do this, this could happen. If you do this could happen. Evidenced by things on social media or online. They didn't have all that. So the only the only catalog of evidence that they could have, which is a plus and minus, is the people that they were around or had talked to,
Mhm.
or maybe a news channel, right? Or radio channel. I shouldn't even say news channel. A radio, maybe TV, depending on when your parents grew up. But
Yeah.
and I think that's good and bad for two reasons. One, it gives them less. One, it's a positive because it gives them less things to worry about that could happen. They could
Right.
only see that, okay, if I do this, then this will happen. So I want that to happen. I'm going to do this. And two, I guess on the reverse side of it, they only have the limits to what they can see happen. So one of the benefits, if we use it in the right way of today, of using social media and the internet, is we can see endless possibilities of the action of what results our actions will produce,
Mhm.
which I think is very powerful as long as you don't get distracted by the negative things.
Yeah, it's a tool, and
Yeah.
you can build things with tools, you can destroy things with tools. It's it's like how to navigate it. Learning fire, it can keep you warm or it can burn you alive, right? But you kind of have to learn by trial and error of that if you don't know what fire is.
Yeah.
And I look at social media and that stuff is the same way. Like it's a tool like that. Because you're right, you're definitely so right. And it makes me disillusioned into thinking that we're more connected than we really are. Like, yes, we are connected more on social media, but in our day to day lives, it's not, we're not all getting after it together, We're still living life, we're still in reality. And sometimes you get all built up, and maybe that's where some of that anxiety comes from too, like reaching out to people, thinking that maybe all the talent agencies get on their Facebook group and talk about you, like that's I think that's partly where that comes from for me. It's just thinking that everyone is more connected than they actually are.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, that's what I would say to that. But also, we can use it as a tool too, because you can connect easier than ever before, which is also great.
Yep. So I guess to wrap it up is use the prospect of failure not as something that you're afraid of, but more as a opportunity to learn and shift your mindset around the things you create in your head and try to decrease your time to action on the things you're worrying about to thus decrease anxiety cost. So
Yeah, to quote the philosophers, just do it.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah. To quote Nicholas Nike, the creator
Was
of
that Nike
Nike.
that did that?
Nike's just do it.
Oh,
That's
just do it.
yeah.
I was thinking 100%. Who said that?
I don't know who said that.
Let's look it up real quick.
Can
Then
you
we'll
look it
let you
up?
go.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to know. I
Oh,
don't
Wayne
know.
Gretzky. Oh, we shouldn't have known
Oh,
that.
we should have known that. We
That's a
definitely
big
should have
one.
known that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that everyone says that though. If you told me right now that Michael Jordan came up with that, I would have believed you
That's kind of what I was thinking.
because it's
I'm sure.
basketball, right?
I'm sure he says that. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm sure they all say that.
But
Why wouldn't they? Okay,
great quote.
let's wrap it now. Let's officially wrap it. So,
All right.
thank you
Well,
guys as always for listening. Y'all know the drill. If you are newcomers, you don't know the drill. But if you guys have been enjoying the podcast, really like the podcast, feel free to like the podcast wherever you're listening from. Feel free to follow the podcast. Feel free to rate the podcast. And thank you again for all of you that have, because we have a good amount of ratings already, but it can be even more. So thank you guys so much for that. Also, follow the Instagram. We're on YouTube as well. So maybe you're on YouTube right now. But if you're not, you can check that out. We have video rocking and rolling. We have HD quality on YouTube rocking and rolling. And also Instagram. We're on the Instagram still posting. Feel free to follow the Instagram for more updates. We've been pretty active on the Instagram. We're on TikTok too. We're posting a lot of our shorts and our reels. So if you like TikTok and want us in the TikTok feed, check us out there. We're also on X/Twitter/ we don't really know what to call it yet during this transitional phase. Patrick is rocking and rolling on the Twitter and doing a great job over there. Definitely follow the Twitter and check it out. And yeah, also we've been meaning to implement the Q&A, and we'll advertise it more for any of you guys that are wondering about that, because we would love to get questions from you guys to do in like kind of the last 10 minutes of the episode, so we can kind of interact with y'all more, make us all feel more a part of it. So we'll get an update going there, because I definitely really want to do that. We'd love to actually hear from you guys, be able to interact with y'all more. And yeah, we think it'd be really cool. Patrick, anything else you got?
I think that's it, man. I think you wrapped it up well, and appreciate everyone for listening.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Catch you on the next one.